Hello and welcome to the third tutorial in the Intro to CryFX series. In this one I'm going to be discussing where to find the utility code and common functions that you may or may not need in whatever shader effect that you're trying to achieve. So the first one that I always open is the common.cfi file. This includes a lot of things. As you can see, it's quite a long file, but don't get discouraged. This is the basic common stuff that you use in shaders. So there's a lot of things like get texture 2D, and this retrieves the texture from a variable. It returns it as a texture 2D type, and the where that stuff is defined is down here, and you can see there's a lot of them. There's one function for each basic slot in the texture in the material editor. You can use the get diffuse text to get pretty much any texture except for normals, and you will see why in a second here. We're going to go down to, or rather up, to the get normal map overloaded functions. So as you can see, there's a lot more going on in the get normal map than there is in the get diffuse. This is things like getting the LODs and gradients, and also creating the Z, the .z, or the Z channel, the blue channel in the normal map, since that is discarded when you save the normal map. So it gets reconstructed in the shader here. Later on down here, you'll see things that are probably fairly familiar. Get terrain elevation is just a basic function that returns the terrain elevation at a specific pixel. Get gradient map is a generic function for getting a gradient of a sampler 2D. And there's a lot in here that I won't go into, but if you can't find something, a function like get for now or blend functions or something, if they're not in the common.cfi file, they're in the next file that we're going to look at, and that is the shader lib, or the shade lib file. This is where you're going to find a lot of shading functions. So here's gloss to specular exponent. Here's get Fresnel, which you would use for, well, getting Fresnel if you want to do something like a fuzzy shader, a cheap fuzzy shader, or outline shader. This is a good way to do it. Get attenuation, physical light attenuation, get spot attenuation. So as you can see, it's a lot of parameters of things that you need to calculate certain things. If you're looking for things like the BRDFs are all in here. So at least as far as I know, they're all in here. So here's the diffuse BRDF, for instance. And some are commented, some aren't. The Burley BRDF here is not very well commented, actually, but you get the point. If you need something, if you want to edit like base BRDFs, the shade lib is where you're going to do that. It's also where you're going to find all the layer blending stuff. So this is for like the blend layer. If you wanted to edit, say, the blend layer to support a third layer or something, then you would need to edit this function, among a few other things, but that gives you a general idea of a use case. This is also where the parallax occlusion mapping and the silhouette mapping and the offset bump mapping is all laid out. The next file that you're going to want to look into if you're looking for anything having to do with vertexes is the vertex lib. I'm sure you can see a pattern arising here in the naming convention. But this is where most of the vertex structs are constructed. So this is the base information that is handed off to the vertex shader, and then to the pixel shader inside of the vertex shader output. So this is the struct that has the vertex position, the V view, the V normal, so the normals for that particular vertex, the texture coordinates, depth, and as you can see, there's quite a few different ones, and they differ based on what struct it is. So this is important to keep in mind. If you don't have access to a particular vertex data point, then you need to look and find what struct that your vertex shader is using. For instance, the lm.cfx file is using app2vert general. So you'll need to track that down, and you can do that by using find in files, and you just point it to wherever the shaders are that you're currently using. In my case, it's the CryEngine 5.5, which I believe I have in... I don't have it in my favorites. But regardless, you can use the search function in Notepad++ to quickly find that sort of thing. And among other things, this also has the vertex library also has various vertex functions and its own computations. So you might want to take a look through here, and you'll probably recognize some things, some functions in here from just looking through other shaders. But it's a good place to go if you're looking for anything vertex related. That pretty much wraps up the utility code. There is a few other files that you may need to open, such as the FX defs and things like that, if you're wanting to define your own custom texture slots and things like that. But those will all be gone through in the feature programming tutorials. So I won't go into detail in those just yet. But everything you need, for the most part, should be in these 4 files: the common zpass, the common.cfi, the shadelib, and the vertex lib. Thank you for watching this tutorial. The next tutorial will be about kind of wrapping up the structural elements and working on setting up our first quick features.